Good evening, everyone. Namaskar. May I please request everyone to put their phones on silent or switch it off, if it is all right. My name is Shweta, and I am from Westland Publications Private Limited, an Amazon company. And it's an immense pleasure to be here for the launch of Shunya, the Mumbai launch of Shunya by Shri M. Before we proceed with this evening today, I would like to request Debashri Rakshit, from Westland. She is the managing editor and has worked with Shri M in creation of his first fiction novel, Shunya. Debashri.
Thank you, Shweta. I would first like to begin by saying that this has been a wonderful journey for us in the last 6 months since the book was published in May. It has received great reviews in the media. We have done launches across cities. I think this journey has been a learning curve for us. And also, I would personally like to thank everyone who has been a part of this, everyone from the Satsang Foundation, everyone from Westland Amazon who has tried to give the book its best. That's the first thing. The second thing I think is that at this point in time, this is a book which speaks to the times because it talks about the guru, the idea of the guru in a certain way. I will just quickly talk a bit about the book and what Shunya stands for. While I was reading the book, I felt that Shunya, which you will know if you read the book, is that Shunya stands for non-existence or nothingness, and yet he's still the spiritual leader or the guru. And I think that the spiritual leader here works in the form of suggestions. He is more of a symbol rather than a flesh and blood person. He's both powerful, both vulnerable, and he also disappears at the end of the novel, and then he reincarnates in a completely different way, in a completely different kind of non-existence. And I think that this is the message of the book, that this is the way that, at a time when lots of human beings are being elevated to the status of gurus, when there are many religions being formed around the idea of a guru, it's very important to understand the role of the guru. And I think this is what this book does. It's a critique of our times, and it's a critique of not only the role of a spiritual leader, but how we as human beings perceive that role and what we should do with it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Debashri. This was an insightful message. Now, moving forward, I take the privilege of inviting our special guest, the panelist, who will be doing the discussion with Shri M today. Ladies and gentlemen, may I now take this privilege to introduce our first panel member for today's evening. May I request Mr. Ranjit Hoskote to please come on stage. Ranjit is a poet, cultural theorist, and a curator, author of many books, including most recently Jhana Whale, published by Penguin in 2018. He has served as a religion editor to the Times of India during 1996 till 1999, and he has founded the popular column of spirituality and philosophy, The Speaking Tree, which now continues as an expanded feature of the Times till this day. A big round of applause for Mr. Ranjit. Now I take this honor of inviting our second panel member, Ms. Rama Bijapurkar. Rama Bijapurkar is a management consultant by profession though, but she is a relatable person and a representative of many of us. A curious layperson with no spiritual credentials and no particular ability to understand the metaphysical. However, like many of us raised in India, she has unquestioning belief that there is something beyond and seeking embedded in her DNA. She is also the author of internationally acclaimed best-selling books on consumer India, We Are Like That Only, Understanding the Logic of Consumer India, and Chinese editions titled Winning in the Indian Market. These are just a few to just name. A big round of applause for Ms. Rama. And to proceed further, finally, may I please request Shri M, the author himself, a big round of applause. Shri M, no introduction is required. He is the author of several books, a spiritual guide, a social reformer, himself and as an educationist, and he heads the Satsang Foundation. It's a pleasure to be here, and once again, an honor. So we take this evening forward with the panel discussion. Thank you so much. Before we proceed with the evening, may I please request all author and the panel members to hold the book for a quick photo op. It's an official launch for Mumbai, guys. So a round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all for being here this evening. It's a very special privilege to be present on this occasion and to be discussing this marvelous novel. And I have to say that despite the very kind and generous things that were said about me, I have no particular qualifications to be here. I'm just riding out on the karmas of my ancestors. Two of my great-granduncles were in the circle around Annie Besant and Jiddu Krishnamurti in his early years, and they helped found Rajghat, the school in Banaras. So it's via Theosophy and the Krishnamurti circle that I make my journey to this book and to your marvelous life and your teachings, Shri M. So what we thought we would do, Rama and I, is to approach the book as well as your work from different points of view, because we come from, we bring different kinds of trainings and preoccupations to this. So perhaps we could tease out the various meanings of the book and what fascinates us about it. So Rama, could I just invite you to begin, and then I'll come back in with questions.
I thought maybe we should ask Shriyam if he would like to say a few words.
That would be absolutely marvelous. Would you open with a few words about the book? That would be wonderful.
First of all, very thankful that both the panelists, the respected panelists, have come here for this book launch. I came to meet both of you some time back, and I kind of understand your background, and I know that it would turn out to be a very good session. I think so. Now, regarding the book, I'm just going to say a few words. You know, when I wrote my autobiography, I have written other little books, but the big, large book-length one was the autobiography, non-fiction. Many people thought it was fiction. So I thought, from then I've been thinking, maybe if I write fiction, what will happen? So in the beginning, when I was very young, I've written some short stories for the Indian Express and so on, which were published, and people were very happy about it. Kushwant Singh was the editor of Hindustan Times when I published a short story from the Andamans, where I was working as a journalist. And he said, stop everything and start working on fiction. I said, so I can't do that. So I thought, let me write. So 13 years ago, I conceived of this book called Shunya. I didn't call it Shunya then. I had this idea in my mind, right? And it took 13 years for me to have the guts to kind of complete it and send it out to the publisher. And since Amazon, and the managing editor of Amazon, Debussy, found it interesting. So they said, we can work on this. Of course, she did a lot of editing work, you know that, on it. I said, have a free hand. So this is the book, which is Shunya. I have to add that although it's a fiction book, it's a novel. Some people start asking me, is that you? Are you going to disappear like Shunya? And so on. The other thing is, in my life, spiritual life, I have met so many strange beings who sometimes one would think are crazy. But on closer examination, I found that they think that we are crazy. You know, so there is a word used for this, which is avaduta. I've met several such people. And probably you will find the influence of these avadutas and their characters in this one character called Shunya. I don't want to elaborate on the word Shunya because I think it will come up in the discussion soon. We'll go into that. But this is the genesis of the novel, Shunya. I don't want to say anything more. I worked hard on it from 13 years till I found maybe now it's time to for an editor to take a look at it. So that's about all. Now it's up to you to. Thank you very much.
So what was the hesitation? Because I also read in the last part where you thank everybody in the acknowledgements, where you said you showed it around to a few friends to ask them, is this really worth much? So why was that?
That's, madam, because I haven't written a full-length fiction before, and I was not sure if I had the. Fiction is a completely different kind of thing. Facts we can write because non-fiction, because you know the subject. Fiction makes a lot of invention, So I was not particularly sure if I was ready for this, which is why I asked many people. And also it reflects a lot of spiritual things in this, in its own way. And I was wondering if the audience would be ready for such a kind of a book. If people would really be interested. When I got kind of certificate from a few honest people who would not tell me a lie, and said, I think you should go ahead with this, that's when I decided that maybe we should send it to a couple of publishers. So happened that Amazon responded first.
Lucky them. But this morning and a couple of weeks earlier, I heard your talk that you gave. It was on YouTube at Google. And it was a cognitive talk that went straight to the mind. And I also read your previous book, The Himalayan Adventure.
Autobiography?
Yeah, the book about your time in the Himalayas. In my business, we would say that they're completely different brands that have written both these. So are they brand variants? Are they does it come out of completely different places? How do you reconcile
now we have to enter kind of forbidden territory because, why I say this is because people say, oh, somebody is schizophrenic or somebody has a split personality. So the stock answer that I give is there anybody who is not schizophrenic? I mean, what is the meaning of schizo? Split. Phrenia is brain. We all have different personalities, different aspects of our personalities. It's when they clash and then it becomes very obvious that people say, oh, this guy. Otherwise we are all like that in some way. So I have both all these things in my mind. On one hand it is spiritual, on the other hand it is, then I can be sometimes quite light-hearted. In fact, I was thinking if I should write a collection of jokes. Mm, but what I hesitate is some of them may be too bad for people. So, this is how it is. So, there are no two distinct personalities writing two kinds of books, fiction, non-fiction. It's just that there are so many personalities involved that sometimes one works, sometimes the other works. Let's put it that way. But somehow I have acquired over the years the knack of integrating them and trying to present a united front. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Sometimes with my wife probably knows that. Sometimes it breaks, but she's here.
But are they different target markets? If it's the same person, I mean, were they meant for different groups of people? Did you say, oh, you know, the first one is for the left brain Google people, and this one is for, you know, people like myself?
I don't think so.
No.
When I write anything, first and foremost, I write it for my own satisfaction, honestly. And then I need to work in such a way that it gets interesting for people. That's where the art comes in. In fact, even my autobiography and this novel and my short stories, people would think I have two models. One early model, of course, is Valmiki, who made this beautiful Ramayana. The Ramayana story is so simple. Rama was the son of Dasharatha. Finished. Okay. Sita his wife was taken away by Ravana. He went and found Sita and finished. The story is over. But look how Valmiki wrote it and made it beautifully interesting. And you get Hanuman in it, beautiful character. See? That is one model. But the other model is a modern writer. You won't believe this, but before I wrote my autobiography, even before I wrote Shunya, I read Hemingway many times. I love The Old Man and the Sea, and I like that direct language. There's no many fancy trimmings, as you know. It's direct. So this is what this is the influence that I probably had.
But the book is also it's in a long tradition of spiritual autobiography. I'm thinking actually as much of your autobiography as of the novel, because you, if one puts it in an artisanal, writerly way, you use a lot of the same material. The meetings with remarkable people, the surprising bursts of another dimension into the so-called normal domain. But it all it seems to circle around this figure of the unpredictable bearer of spiritual wisdom. I mean, you spoke of the Avadhut.
Unpredictable?
Bearer of spiritual wisdom. You spoke of the Avadhut. It could be the Kalandar in the tradition. It's the inspired madman. Could we draw you out a little on this figure? Because we're living in times when spiritual teachers are doing a great deal to seem as aligned with orthodoxy as possible. On the other hand, the great teachers have always been at the margin. So could you speak about this?
Yeah, and if I can add, you also say in your, it's the tantalizing question, right? Who is he, a lunatic, an avadhuta, or a fraud? So, I mean, tell us about, as Ranjit said, about Shunya.
It's now a very difficult question. I think we need to have a whole day satsang on this matter. But, okay, I'll try my best to put it through. Yes, I think one of the most wonderful things about the spiritual journey, as well as the growth of one's mind, is that it puts things upside down. This unpredictability which you talked of, it's also looking at something completely different. There is a beautiful chapter in the Bhagavad Gita, the 15th chapter, It starts with a very beautiful statement. Urdhvamulam athashakam. There is a tree whose roots are up above and branches down below. Normally we know only of trees whose branches are up above and roots down below. So, which means putting things on their head and turning them around. That unpredictability is a very essential part of spiritual understanding. And it has nothing to do with any religion per se. Religiosity I can understand, but not in an organized manner. So, when people are trying to align themselves with organized religion, especially a teacher, there must be some reason behind it. I don't know what the reasons are. Political compulsions? Could be. Or something else. But true teachers I have seen who are not affiliated to anything. My master, with whom I spent 3 years and after that many years, Maheswarnath, whom I have mentioned here, he was from the Nath Sampradaya. But he wore the paraphernalia of the Naths, of course. But he did not allow me to do any of those things. And he was a barefooted man. He had no banner. He had no organization. He refused to sit in a vehicle. He walked. And it was from him that I learned to walk. The walk of hope, the seeds of that walk came from walking behind this man for 3 years because he wouldn't get into a vehicle. So I also had to walk. You see that? So the originality of spiritual experience, which is given in the Upanishads earliest possible, and also in some Sufi texts, is something which cannot be covered up by any other subsidiaries. It has its own core. But then when you write fiction or when you write autobiography, you actually cannot expose everything. Autobiography is just a part of the life that I understand. I would say it's the tip of an iceberg. But then when you see the tip, you know there's something lying under it. So roughly this is what... and of course, since you know Krishnamurti, he had a very normal... He used to say this very often, that a devil and his friend went for a walk. And the devil bent down and picked something and put it in his pocket. And his friend said, "What did you pick up just now?" And the devil said, "I just picked up the truth." The truth, T-R-U-T-H. So his friend said, "Then your days are numbered. Because you are the opposite of truth. You put truth in your pocket, you're finished." So the devil smiled and tapped him and said, "Don't worry, friend, I'll organize it." You know what I mean? Then it is dead. You see, the core is God. The great Sufi Bahauddin Naqshband, who's the founder of the Naqshbandi order, one of the oldest orders of Sufis, said, after 200 years, if you see a Sufi organization existing, you can be sure that there is only the shell and the core has disappeared. So it's very difficult to maintain that core. It's not easy. It might disappear here also, but we'll try our best not to let it happen. This is my attempt, honestly.
How would you secure that? I mean, Krishnamurti through his life taught, in a sense, his teaching was self-disruptive. I mean, he always taught against the authority of the teacher.
Right.
How do you do that? I mean, these are two completely different impulses. The need to produce an assembly of people who seek together, but the fact that as teacher, you have to save them from a dependency syndrome.
It's very difficult. I keep knocking this into people's heads, but you find it very difficult to let go in. Because I always keep saying, it's also there in the books, it's in Shunya also, the character of Shunya, that the teaching is more important than the teacher. The people worship the teacher, and forget what's being said, what's being told. It's all gone. Then you see only the image. So somebody asked me just now today, a young lady, I'm searching for a teacher. Can I find one? Can you tell me how? I said, listen, it's better not to have a teacher than fall into wrong hands. Who knows who I am? You just met me. This is the way I try to keep them out. But then, if people are really sincere about the path, they will, I think, find someone who will guide them. But we have to make sure that it doesn't become... Look, a person who is searching for the truth and who goes to a teacher, the person should be free to ask questions. If at any moment you say, don't ask questions, this is the ultimate truth, that means you have something to hide. I have nothing to hide. And I'm not selling anything, you see. So, like, now this subject, meditation is being sold. You know that?
Packaged and sold.
Huh?
Packaged and sold.
Packaged and sold. So, people come to me and say, we want to take Kriya Yoga. How much does it cost? Can you believe this? Because they say, we go there, we have to pay, we go there, so you might... And somebody says, can we learn it tomorrow? We are ready to give this much. So they're surprised when you say it is free. And in fact, some people don't practice it because it is free. They think there's nothing in it. I know several people who have taken Kriya from me 10 years ago and who are not practicing it. They would rather prefer something more dramatic. So all these dangers are there. So Shunya might be one way of breaking this. Could be, I don't know. But they might think it's fiction. But through fiction, one can learn many things. Like I said, autobiography, people might say, oh, this is some yoga, some meditation, religion. We don't want to read it. But if you say, oh, it's a storyline, so they'll read it. And while they read it, they may grasp something.
More purely literary question, which is this. There was a point in my reading of the novel when I just switched off and said, I'm not going to think about who wrote this, I'm just going to look at the text. And there's an incredibly complex social portraiture of Kerala, including Hindu, Muslim, what happens in the transition from belief to rationalism, the figure of the communist uncle. Often all of these impulses are present in the same family. So it's a very complex portrait of a particular society. So could I draw you out on that, just addressing you only as strictly as a literary author rather than what else, the spirituality that you bring to it?
I was born and brought up in Kerala. Till the age of 19, I lived in Kerala. Then, of course, I ran away to the Himalayas. So till 19 years, Kerala is a place where most people, by the time they reach college level, have had some kind of exposure to leftist philosophy. In fact, in a college we used to have what is called the Lenin Clinic. You go in through one door, you come out to the completely brainwashed. Somehow I didn't get brainwashed. Because by the time I came out, I went off to the Himalayas. So, and what I have noticed, it's very complex. It's not as if communism is per se bad or good. I mean, this is very difficult to say. There's a beautiful novel written by a Malayalam writer called Tagari Shivashankara Pillai. It's called Ningal Enne Communistaki. You made me a communist. It's wonderful. I can't read Malayalam, honestly. I've read only in English translation. So, which means there are some good points to be taken in the social fabric of Kerala. And since I was most familiar with that state, I used that background because you write something of unfamiliar territory, anybody can find out that this is fake. So I wanted it to be something that I really knew in my heart. So if you find in Kerala, you will find lots of influences coming together. Adi Shankara came from Kerala. He walked all the way to India and established the 4 mathas. Okay, the first communist government in India, elected government was in Kerala. EMS Nambudri Part is such a contrast. EMS Nambudri Part comes from a very orthodox Nambudri family. In fact, when I was young, I met him and had a chat, and he told me he has attended Pathshalas. he could chant. So, but then his mind was different. So what I'm trying to present is that a complex setup in which emerges something which has a spiritual impact. So I think this is kind of influenced my writing of the book.
I have another question.
So let me just build on what you said. I know you said that you write for yourself, but I'm a unfortunate management type. So I did read your book and I was fascinated by it. I don't know what I understood or what I didn't. So if in your mind this book was a success, was worth the time and effort and everything that took, what would you expect the book to do? Or what is there a metric? Forgive the phraseology, but
Yeah.
Ranjit is like, good Lord, are you actually asking about metrics in literature? But honestly.
Yeah.
I also studied economics, so it's fine.
What metrics, if you want to say, I want to present in the fiction book, Shunya, a really pure and clear Paramahamsa or an Avadhuta who is not bothered about society or what society says, who is not bothered about profit and who is not bothered about even that his life is in danger if he is moving towards the truth. This character I wanted. This is the matter. And it is very dangerous. You can't live like that. Even I have to sometimes pretend some things. I can't. But the Shunya here is absolutely threadbare. When he wants to call somebody a fool, he does it. And he is quite clear about it. I can't do that. And the thing is, many times I feel like it. But in fact, I have to keep myself from... People say, do you get angry if somebody calls you an idiot or a fool? I said, listen, suppose I did know English and somebody called me a fool. What does it matter?
Yes, it's a flower, beautiful flower.
Suppose I knew Hindi, I might have thought it's a fool.
That's what it means.
So language plays a great deal. So here Shunya is clear. Rarely are there such beings. And such beings, unfortunately, don't have a large following. They don't have an establishment. Therefore, from this you can guess if somebody has a big following and a big establishment, it's a fake.
Well, just can I ask one more question before passing it over to you? To just build. Now, I'm going to ask your forgiveness in advance for asking you this question. But I know that you also talk about the supreme truth. I don't see the word God, Ishwar anywhere. And this morning a friend and I were talking about it, and we were wondering whether this non-denominational spirituality, are you preaching to the converted, which is really why all of us... Preaching to the converted, which is why we're all here. And there are enough people, I guess, who do see human distinctions tied up with religion.
True.
So are you actually, is that a target market too?
I think your marketing words are... well, I don't have a market really. I am as I am. Take it or leave it. I mean, this is my principle. Really, seriously.
Yeah, so I guess what you're absolutely right. What I mean by target market is that what about that group of people? I mean, if you seek to influence them, do you need to do it differently? I mean, are they going to switch off because they do believe in human differences?
Yeah. No, what I do is I leave myself open to discussion. So people can certainly talk to me and figure out what they think about me, and then I leave it at that. It's up to them to decide what. Yeah. I don't convert people. I don't, let me put it this way, I'm not in the business of collecting disciples. Serious.
Yeah, that I think is...
Serious.
Right. I think that's clear.
Thank you.
You know, one of the many contexts that informs your writing, I notice, is also concern with teachers who, like you, were not in the business of collecting disciples. People came to them. And that's something that I find very inspiring about your writing. Swami Lakshman Ju, for instance, or Nisargadatta Maharaj, or it might be Mahant Veerbhadra Mishra in Banaras. These were people who had an inspiring presence. They taught. Like you, it was take it or leave it. But how does one draw people's attention to this kind of teacher? Because the other kind of teacher, the snake oil salesman, is much more prominent.
What more?
The sort of snake oil salesman, corporate guru kinds of figures that we see today.
Snake charmers.
Snake charmers also. Yeah. How do you reorient, for lack of another word, a spiritual audience to this other kind of modest, unassuming, but truly inspiring teacher?
There I must say that Indian tradition, the ancient Indian tradition, I'm talking about the Upanishads, we already have a root out there. We have a base. It has been largely covered over and plastered with various facades, but it's still there. The roots are there. So what I do is, if you say, forget about all this, no. So I take them to the Upanishads. You know? And when they see the Upanishads, then they realize, in the core of even this philosophy of this country which we have, there are things which are so wonderful and which have no such modifications that we are talking about. That's what I do. I take them, luckily for me, because I studied with Maheswarnath Babaji, I can go back to the Upanishad. I can quote sentence, word, split the word. I can do that. So, I am able to do that. And so the people who even are very deeply rooted in Sanskrit traditions, they are at least ready to sit down and discuss. So that helps. Sanskrit is a beautiful language. Once I remember I told Krishnaji was much senior to me, of course. And I said, sir, this Sanskrit, he said, do you listen to this Sanskrit? I said, yes, sir. I said, they are very beautiful, isn't it? I said, yes, sir, they are very beautiful. And they are very deep. I said, then he said to me in a low tone, a wee bit hypnotic, don't you think? So my message is, if you are into tradition, go back to the Upanishads. If you don't have any tradition, then we can directly talk about things. But if you go back to the Upanishads, because they are the oldest literature available to us. Everything else came later. They are the end of the Vedas. So that is true Vedanta. But then I also don't shy away from tradition. Krishnaji had, he said, throw all your old books into the sea. I said, sir, but this is like throwing the baby out with the bath water. There may be something out there. Just because something is tradition doesn't mean that it should be completely wrong. And I must admit that here was a man who many people accept as gospel truth, whatever it is. He said to me, you're right, I think I have to think about it. This is something very rare. You can't. Now these half-baked people, you tell them something, they will shut up. What do you know? See that? So that is something which I have imbibed from him, I must say.
True, the self-criticality of the tradition. But there's another aspect both in your own journey and I'm going to stop making this distinction between your own journey and the novel. They're both your story, very clearly. What I greatly admired also was the fact that you kicked up against the taboos that bind and honestly ruin this society. The polarization between religions, the persistence of caste. Through the encounters, whether in the novel or in your journey, each time there's a way in which you demonstrate that these divisions are false and that they're unproductive. I'm thinking...
man-made.
Yeah, so could I draw you out on this, particularly because you have an extremely intriguing journey yourself. You straddle religious traditions and to the extent that their identities, religious identities. So could I draw you out on that?
You know that I was born in a setup or a family which has nothing to do in many ways with the Hindu tradition. Yeah. But then from childhood my interest was not in the formal religion but to see if there is a core to this or is it just meaningless stuff, core. So when I found out the core, how I latched on to the Upanishadic tradition was because I found that you don't have to start your inquiry by first believing something. You start your inquiry, then you figure out what it is. You can't say, I believe in whatever. I don't want to use the words because I believe such and such a thing is, and so is a teacher. You don't have to say anything. 5 times a day you don't have to proclaim. Because that is the ultimate, the beginning of saying that I belong to this group. I said, no, I don't want to do that. Let me inquire and figure out. That's the inquiry that brought me to the Upanishads. So, throughout my life, even when I get into these traditions, I have kept clear that I would rather find out than admit before finding out. But it's very interesting. At the end of the journey, I would say, actually this journey doesn't end, but in the last end of the journey, maybe it's still continuing, the journey continues. I figured out that there are certain things which the ordinary, rational, so-called limited brain cannot understand. There is something beyond. When the rational brain becomes quiet because it knows that beyond this I cannot travel and becomes silent, then something else takes place, which is difficult for even the mind to define. In fact, Upanishad said, Yad vachana abhyutitam, which even words cannot describe. But then I would rather come to this through understanding and through thinking rather than somebody says, it's like that, accept it. This I have never done. This has been my journey. And I think to all young people, especially in the new generation, I would say, think. If some teacher says, put your thought process in cold storage, run away. That's not the way. Think, the Upanishad, what is the Gayatri Mantra? What is the last sentence of the Gayatri Mantra? Dhyo yona prachodayat, may by intelligence be stimulated. So how can you throw it off? Of course, the most intelligent man or woman very soon discovers the limitations of her own intellect. I understand that. But you discover it only through intelligence, right? And the separation between intelligence and knowledge, which is information. Information is required to write, for instance. You should know English. But the insight or the intelligence is how creative you are. That can't be learned. There are workshops for writing and all that, but I understand that. But something original has to come out, it has to break through, out of the box. And I think we are fortunate in this country to have a tradition, I'm not talking about the traditional religion or something, which laid great stress on understanding, intelligence, exploration, open-mindedness and non-prejudice. We have a great tradition and we should not neglect it. At least the new generation, we might have messed it up in our generation, but the new generation
I will let him have the last word.
Oh my goodness. As we were saying earlier, this, Rama, was really your question. Many of our traditional schools, of the great 6 great schools, these include, they include atheistic philosophies, which is forgotten today. somehow.
Which is for
We
God.
tend to forget this. We tend to believe that so-called Indian culture is deeply theistic. But we've had very strong atheistic schools. We've had, like the Charvakas, the Lokayat, we've had materialist schools as well. When you speak of regaining the tradition in its criticality, does your return to tradition embrace that diversity as well?
Yes, I do. According to me, all ways of thinking should be allowed. We should not cut anything out. As you said, there are the 6 darsanas. There is the Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Vedanta, Sankhya, Purva Mimamsa, and Yoga. These are the 5 darsanas, or 5 or 6? 6 darsanas. So, they all are different approaches to this understanding of the truth. Some of them have denied, like the Charvakas, who probably follow the Vaisheshika doctrines, that there is no need of. But then you should also know that the Jains have no creative God, there is no creator, there is no Ishvara, but they are among the most religious people in their practices. Ahimsa Paramo Dharma comes from the Jains. They don't have somebody sitting up in heaven making people and throwing them down. Then you have the Buddhists who don't have a creator concept. Okay. Now, there are theistic philosophies, but they came later. Not so early as that. But that doesn't mean that the non-theist philosophy, darsanas of India, do not discuss the truth. They do discuss the truth. The modus operandi may be shown as different, but they also talk about finding the ultimate understanding. That's there. So, I'm saying that should be the most important part of a tradition. And therefore, like for instance, yoga. Yoga is a darshana. But 90% of the yoga darshana is derived from Sankhya. Now, Sankhya is so important, Kapila. Sankhya is so important that in the Gita, Krishna is made to say that among the munis I am Kapila. And what is the, after Arjuna Vishada Yoga, the first chapter, what is the next chapter? Sankhya. So Sankhya is and Sankhya is a totally non-theistic philosophy. Purusha Prakriti. There is no Ishvara out there. And then from there comes yoga. Patanjali has added Ishvara also in yoga, but in very rare instances. Ishvara pranidhanit va. When you use the word va, in Sanskrit, also, which means this is also possible. Now, he also says aushadhanani, that means it's also possible through drugs to attain samadhi. So are we on an equal footing? One drug here and one drug there. So all I'm trying to say is that there is no such concept required. Well, if you have found it and if it is your faith, that's okay. We don't want to do anything with that. But that yoga needs to have an Ishvara concept, or that Upanishad. Look, can I use a little Sanskrit? The Keno Upanishad is one of the oldest Upanishads. It's come from the Samaveda. Samaveda, Krishna says in the Gita, among the Vedas I am Samaveda, not even Rigveda. Right? And in the Upanishad, describing various things, it says, in last it says, Yan manasa namanyute, yana hurmanomatam, that which even the mind cannot conceive, and because of which the mind has its capacity to perceive. Tadeva brahmatvam vidvi, understand that alone is the truth, the Brahman. Nedam yadidam upasate, nothing that you worship here. Now this is a sweeping statement. Do we think sometimes about these matters? And coming to yoga, the yama niyamas, the practices which you have to follow are more important than the theory. And what is the first yama? Ahimsa. So, there are so many aspects which we neglect because we are caught up in different theories and different, what can I call it, intoxicating experiences. So we tend to be not so sober enough to think about these matters. So I've decided, I've already working on it, that my next book would be Yoga for the Godless. Don't ask me whether you believe in God or not. That's a different matter. We are working on it. And I am using all the support of traditional sources to show that as far as Patanjali is concerned, there is no need of that concept. There are others, of course, but
That looks like a marvelous way to. Could we now turn to? Could we take questions?
are we having public questions?
The floor is open for Q&A.
Good God.
For any questions to the panel members, Shri M, more than happy to take it.
Juhi wants to ask a question.
Namaste. Shri M, I read Shunya. Normally I take forever to read a book, but Shunya I finished within 24 hours because I found it very fascinating. The character Shunya, he, like Ramaji just mentioned, you cannot understand, is he an avduta, is he a master, is he a guru, or is he a fraud? Because he, well, to my little understanding, he eccentric, sometimes swears, sometimes loses his
Cool.
Yes, loses his cool, and the way he speaks, he's blunt, or he is, sometimes he's he's unlike what we think of as a guru.
Right.
So I came away from the book, then looking at everybody on the street and thinking, is this person mad? Could this be a spiritual master that I'm not recognizing? How would I ever know the difference? I mean, how would I know if I came across someone on the street as to who it is?
It's very difficult to say. Let me tell you this. I have met many such people who actually don't want them to be recognized themselves. So they behave like completely crazy guys. But if they find somebody who is genuinely interested in spiritual matters, believe me, somehow they will catch you. You cannot go to them, they can come to you. Seriously, I'm not trying to counter your arguments, but it's a fact. I've seen this before. I've met some people who just kicked you out if you go. And there is some, you keep going again and again. Even they kick you out, you go again and again. One day when nobody's around, they'll ask, hey, what do you want? You're shocked. You thought that this man is not going to say anything. I don't know, this is what I feel, okay? This is what I know about this matter.
May I have many questions actually. I could take up the whole evening, but I'll just ask one more.
Okay.
Is again, Shunya visits the home or the shop, a toddy shop. Now, people go to the toddy shop, get drunk normally,
Yes.
and go home, maybe beat up their wives, which is
Right.
not a very pleasant thing.
No.
So then why, I mean, of all places,
Two
does
things.
Shunya come here and then...
Three or four points here to be clarified. One is, a toddy shop is usually associated with such characters. But please believe me, all people who don't drink toddy don't go home and beat up their wives. One. I don't, but I'm just saying. The other is that people, you know why people drink? Many people drink because they are upset with this world. They don't know how to fit into this world, so they paralyze their central nervous system so that for some time nothing is known, everything is so expansive. But next day, of course, you have a problem. That's a different matter. So we can't dismiss the toddy shop guys as completely bad people. And for such people like Shunya, there is no good or bad. Okay? And he doesn't drink, he drinks black tea. Kattan chaya, if you read carefully in Malayalam. And he lives in the backyard of the toddy shop. Okay? And there, only those people will go and see who dare to enter a toddy shop. Respectable people won't enter. He has nothing to do with respectable people. You know what I mean? So these are some of the reasons. These are some of my favorite things. And the other thing is that I forgot. I looked at you and I forgot. There's something about Shunya. Okay. So he lives in a toddy shop. People come and go. In the front there is the toddy shop owner, Sadashivan and his wife, which is woven into the story. And he lives there precisely because he doesn't want to live in any other place which people would associate with a particular sect or a religion. He wants to break the images. He's an image breaker, the ultimate iconoclast. This is why I presented this character as living in a toddy shop. And if you look carefully, the number of the toddy shop is 420, 420. That was deliberate. Because people we consider 420 may not be really. Tomorrow I'm going to the Arthur Road jail. Is it Arthur Road jail? Yeah. Arthur Road jail. So there are 1,000 people prisoners who live inside. I won't call them prisoners. With whom I'm going to talk. And this is what I'm going to tell them, that really you're not different from me. I and you know, people who come into the prison, they're somehow related to Shunya. That's why I'm saying that. People who, there are hundreds and many people in this world who can, through propaganda or through various means, make people excited enough to kill hundreds of people, murder them. There are such people on this earth. They murder people not with a knife or with their hands, but with their words. They can make people kill others, actually, physically. But they are scot-free. Sometimes they are in positions of power. Now, two brothers fight with each other in the village, simple people. In anger, this man hits the other and he dies. He is in jail. On the death row. What about this Hitler who killed hundreds and thousands of people? See, so what is the difference between this poor murderer who did it in a rage and us? We are sitting here. How many times I haven't, but so many people would have thought, it would be nice if this guy dies. It's murder. It's done already. So these are all, Shunya basically is to make one think out of the box. If you remember reading, I'm sure you read through. We all loved your tweet. When Shunya's guru comes, where does he come from? The lunatic asylum. And then there is a chapter where they both converse. There's nothing, it's gibberish. Invented by me. There's nothing. You might think it's some strange language. It's nothing. It's just gibberish. You know?
Namaste, Sriyam. In fact, your book Shunya is in my hand. I have not gone through it. I have gone through your first book, Autobiography of Yogi.
Yeah.
Your autobiography, not Yogi. I mixed up with the. Right.
Okay.
To be very frank with you, it was very demoralizing for me.
Which one?
Your autobiography.
Demoralizing?
Yes.
Why?
Because one has to have a previous karmas like you and Madhu. Or if somebody has to have a Baba Maheswarnath, is the inquiry about truth is not enough to find in this one birth time. So that demoralizes. Because when you follow Nisargat or say you are that, you discard everything, just believe that you are not that. That's simple.
May I say something?
Yes, sir.
The demoralizing will turn into a positive experience when you read Shunya. You haven't read it. I think you should. So this is one of the reasons why the Shunya is in your hands.
The fight becomes then eternal fight, that Shunya becomes Purna or Purna becomes Shunya.
Yes, so exactly.
Shunya is in my hand.
Yes, so now when you read that, you'll begin to understand the meaning of the word Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamaduchyate. But Buddhists may say Shunyamada, Shunyamidam, Shunyat, Shunyamaduchyate. Words, just words. So this Shunya is none other than the Purna. So I would suggest that if you're being demoralized, or please read Shunya.
The question remains unanswered, that we need the Purvjanma karma like you or the Baba Maheswarnath to reach this journey.
Please, can you read this before asking me this question?
That will take some time then.
One day.
Okay.
Very easy to read. 2 days.
Meeting you will be difficult then.
No, sir. Next time when you meet me anywhere in a crowd, I said, I've read Shunya, I have this question.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, Jai Gurudev.
Do we have a time?
I have one question. Sir, in the first book, there's one reference when the young brahmachari is in deep meditation in the cave, and then Muslim fakir comes and desperately hugs him. And then this man gets disturbed, shattered, that he took me out of meditation, and fires him and expels him from the cave. And this man wants to be his disciple and he refuses and says, get out whatever you want to do. And he actually goes and commits suicide. This man is totally indifferent, the young brahmachari. And then he goes and has a wash in the river, comes back, and then that's where he meets Shri Babaji. And he says, Are, ye tumne kya kar diya? You have done such a pap. So, my question is, whether it was all destined, as it is said, कि सब कुछ तय है, everything is predestined, decided. So was it pre-decided, it was a leela, or this young brahmachari created his own karmas on the spot, and this whole thing happened, and this led him to have so many births later? That is your character.
Yes.
So how all that intricacy?
I don't believe in destiny, honestly. I think the world will be a happy place if all the astrologers are put into a ship and sent to an island somewhere. I don't believe in this astrology. This man, who was myself, created his own karma. And what you do today, you will experience tomorrow. The crux of the theory of karma is, what can you do now? Because you can't go back and tinker with the past. You can only work now. And then you can decide what your future is. So I think, are we done? Because some astrologers may have inconvenient questions.
One last question and that's the end then.
Just one question.
Okay, that gentleman on that corner.
Just general question I wanted to ask.
Sir.
Is it okay to do
Where
sadhana?
are you?
I'm here.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask one question. Is it okay to do sadhana in Shavasana if one is not able to sit because of health issues, or does it actually hampers the progress?
Sir, if you are seriously into meditation, it's good to sit and meditate. However, if you cannot, because of bodily disabilities and pains, you can lie down in Shavasana and meditate. There's no problem, except there's one big problem. And that is, when you are in Shavasana, it's easy to fall asleep. Especially when you're meditating, it becomes so pleasant that I know people who have no problem with their knees, who sit down and meditate, and then when the meditation becomes deep, they say, hey, this is also too much effort. Then they stretch, and then within 2 minutes, instead of the pranava, you hear, she's gone. So if you can control yourself from sleeping, then Shavasana is fine. There is no problem.
And one more question. How do I know that the search for Guru is now complete? I mean,
that is difficult. I have pondered also here and there. When this is difficult to define, but if you really find a spiritual teacher, there is one little simple thing that you should keep in mind. Does he want to give you something, or does he want something from you? If he wants something from you, then you can still follow sometime, but keep your checkbook safe. Is one criteria. Also, watch the Guru under all circumstances, not just in a public. It's very easy to smile and talk in a public gathering, but what do you do at home? Only your wife knows. So, don't ask her, please.
So we come to
But don't worry about that. You do your spiritual practice sincerely, and then we'll get to know how things are working. Okay?
So
Thank you.
the session comes to an end here. I think it's been an enlightening discussion, and we have a lot to take from here. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being such a great audience. Thank you to the panel members, Ms. Rama, Mr. Ranjit, to be available for today's discussion. And so that's all. And on behalf of Westland, I thank you everyone who all were behind organizing this event today, especially Vasuki, who was the person behind channelizing everything from Satsang Foundation. Thank you everyone.